Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the third episode of our RotoGrinders Sorare podcast. I am your host, as always, Sean, PSU Fans 2 Newsham. We now have a special guest who will probably be more of a consistent guest going forward. That's one of my best friends in the DFS industry and someone that works with me here at RotoGrinders, Alex Fear My Turtle Harden. Alex, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Sean. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so for those that are not familiar with Alex, he works with me on the specialist sports at RotoGrinders, whether that be tennis, college football, college basketball, soccer especially. So, like, for example, Alex and I work on the soccer projections at RotoGrinders, and we both have gotten into Sorare over the last 6 months or so, albeit a bit differently, which I guess we'll talk about a little bit on this podcast about like how our approach has been on Sorare and what our plans are going forward. So, Alex, this is your first ever show, which is somehow miraculous based on you doing stuff with Fantasy Insiders and RotoGrinders, and you've been involved with the industry forever. So how does it feel to actually get on your first recorded show?
Feels good. Somehow dodged all those bullets over the years, but I'm happy to be here. Glad to be on the show more regularly. And like you said, I think we kind of got into Sorare a bit differently in terms of where we're at with our galleries and such. So Sean obviously jumped in full bore, built up his gallery right away. I've been kind of taking a slower approach, kind of trickling in, buying over time, expanding over several months. So we have a much different approach so far. So happy to get into this.
Yeah, perfect. So yeah, we're going to talk a bit about our experience with Sorare, how we got into Sorare, and what our strategies sort of are. And the reason Alex will be on some of these shows is because I think he gives a very good perspective from different types of galleries. For example, we both have very similar backgrounds within DFS, and we have the exact same way that we came to Sorare, but our approach with how we've done it and how we've sort of gone into Sorare is completely different. And his gallery size is going to be much more in line with what a lot of yours might be, or mine might be in line with what some of you guys have or what you aspire to have in terms of gallery size. So I like the idea of bringing Alex on consistently to discuss the different paths that people can take, because there's no right or wrong way to play Sorare, and there's tons of different ways to go about things. So for those that aren't familiar with our galleries, I will go into and we'll show you Alex's along with mine. So we both came onto the platform. We had seen it around, I would say, Alex, when do you think we started to see stuff with Sorare related? Like October or November, we started seeing Lardino post stuff on Twitter?
Yeah, and I was like, I don't know about these digital cards, man. So it took a while. Maybe like February, started looking a lot closer, and decided to kind of jump in a little bit. Had done Top Shots a bit, but I really couldn't get into that. But this is totally different in my opinion. I saw the utility with the card. It was more focused on the actual fantasy game. So just the utility of the cards was attractive, and the fact that you could keep them forever. As someone who's played a lot of FIFA Ultimate Team, you get cards for that season and then poof, they're gone. So this kind of replaced almost Ultimate Team and also has the fantasy and crypto aspects to it. So it's kind of an ideal mix. But in terms of getting into it, I didn't think I could time the market. I was unsure of how it would play out. So my approach has been gradually adding ETH to the platform and buying cards over time, just to kind of spread out some of that risk a bit. Also, with the fluctuations of the platform itself, I didn't know how that would play out. I think that they've made great decisions. They have a great team. I trust the platform. I just took a longer view approach of things, and I'm still buying cards, adding to my gallery, and kind of over the last month or two have transitioned to buying a lot more super rares and kind of moving down into 2 and 3. So that's been part of the transition for me.
Yeah, and Alex is going to, what we'll talk about, is taking an approach that is really conducive to how to sort of progress throughout divisions And I think it'll be really interesting to see what he's done in terms of like a natural progression. I feel like his progression has been more natural with how he has set up his gallery and how he is doing things. But yeah, so we both saw Twitter and posts from Lardino from like October, November of last year, and we were both interested. But for those not familiar, Alex and I are heavy into the college football and college basketball DFS. So for me personally, my busy time of the year is like August right now until June. But my like January to June, I have a little bit more freedom, even though I'm still really busy. Whereas Alex's busy time is like September through March, and he just doesn't leave his computer at all for 7 months. I don't leave my computer for like 5 months, and then I barely leave my computer for like the next 4 months. So we didn't have the time to sort of research what we wanted to dig in, which is very unfortunate for both of us, because if we came in like October of last year, I feel like we would both be in a great spot. So what we did is we'll use this analogy, and Alex, let me know if you like this analogy. So the way that I would describe how we came into things, we came in at the exact same time. We came in via Lardino. Alex and I were talking about it ourselves individually. And my plan coming into it was to put in about 10 to 15 ether, give or take, and build a gallery that could compete at like Division 4, maybe a little bit Division 3. But what I saw was that there was a massive edge at the higher divisions, and people just were not great at constructing lineups. So I decided to like jump and do a cannonball from like 50 feet into Sorare. Alex is like the guy at the pool that like walks in slowly into the water because it's a little chilly. Then he takes another step down, and then he keeps working his way in. Would you agree with that analogy, Alex?
Yeah, that's also the worst way to get into a pool. But
it is.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I took the approach of adding like an ether two to the site every month or two and kind of gradually building. But I mean, the cannonball approach definitely worked out for you in terms of timing. So in retrospect, maybe it would have been much more beneficial to kind of take that leap, especially looking back at the cards we both bought the first couple of weeks we're on the platform at the price points. But I mean, you don't know how these things will play out, but yeah, you definitely timed it right with your initial splash.
Exactly. And I timed it right for now. Who knows where things will be in the future? Like I could have really timed it right or could have timed it improperly. So it'll be interesting. But yeah, if you look through, this is Alex's gallery here. And if you look through his gallery, he has focused primarily on the MLS. And then he also has looked at the Challenger Europe. He has the same opinion of me that if you're just sort of coming onto the platform and you don't have a boatload of ether to spend, that you should look at things without really worrying about Champion Europe. The idea is, and this goes for both of us, we both feel this way, if you're playing on a smaller budget or you're trying to really get good scores that maybe are quite a bit less expensive, you really do not want to play the Champion Europe divisions because the price points are so high on all of those players. Is that pretty much what you saw as well when you came on?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're on a smaller budget and you're jumping in, like the worst possible thing you can do is buy a Champion Europe or 2 card, and because you're just setting yourself back. Because not only can you play the Americas and Challenger cards in those divisions, you can also play them in the global divisions. So for me, if you're coming in and looking for any value whatsoever, definitely would avoid the top 5 European leagues in terms of cards. But I mean, that's just the approach you take if you're looking for value and kind of maximizing your spend. If you're a Liverpool fan and you just want to buy cards from your team and play them, I mean, you're going to have to pony up for that Allison, or you're going to be running a common goalie with your lineup. But there's multiple approaches. But if you're taking any kind of value-based approach, definitely focusing on kind of the second and third tier leagues is the best approach, especially initially.
Yeah, definitely. Exactly. And it's a situation where I think that you're going to get more bang for your buck. And we'll talk about that a little bit here as we go through, because we'll show you some of our game week teams and we can show you like what the budget was for some of these teams. Now, granted, Alex's results this week, he put up some good scores, but as everyone knows, there were some massive scores out there. And some of these teams, like he's been winning rewards. Like you see, he has a Brad Guzan reward. That's probably a tier 1 or star tier reward in America. So like you can still win these type of players even with a little bit more limited of a budget. So it's all about researching and looking for cards like that. So Alex, for you, when it comes to research, what is your preferred method of finding out players, and how do you sort of search on Sorare data to like find the guys that you deem will be valuable and guys that you want to bring in for cheaper options?
So that's really changed over time once I build up my base gallery. So initially I was going to like the scout and the player rankings and sorting by league or division, and just kind of scrolling through and looking at like the average prices versus the low list, and looking at that delta and kind of identifying people that are being listed for lower than they typically have sold for. And there may be a good reason for that. Maybe they're injured, or maybe they just had a bad 2 or 3 games, and allow you to pick off some value. So initially, when I was just looking for kind of volume to build up my base load, that's the approach I was taking. But over the last couple months, it's more of like just looking for specific players, and especially looking for super rares is much different than shopping for rares. Super rares, I'm kind of looking to see what's been listed recently, sorting by price, and just going through and seeing maybe there's a super rare between 0.1 and 0.2 ETH that maybe they're coming into a new role, or they actually have been playing every game. They just kind of been running bad. I think that allows you to kind of identify some value buys. Like one of my favorite buys this year has been Cascante for Austin. Like I think I got him for like 0.12 or so ETH, and he's become a reliable scorer. If you click the scores, like it's pretty good results for that low cost of a super rare. And that's something that you can put in your division 2 and 3 teams. They're a reliable producer. They start every game, except for he did get a red card last game. So have to look for a replacement next game week. But it's guys like that, I think, that allow you to take a good value-based approach to moving down into division 2 and 3. It's just building up a pool of these type of players. Tanner Beeson's another one for me where I thought it kind of fit the same mold. Fairly young guy coming into a new position. Jungwirth was traded out. He was blocking him a bit. Results aren't as good as Cascante, but I think he can kind of grow into his role. And it's a good longer term card for me. So I thought picking him up for 0.12 or 0.13 ETH was well worth it in the long term. So that's kind of how things have changed for me in terms of looking for cards to add to my gallery. What about you? Now that you have this massive gallery, are you just looking to plug holes? Are you still trying to upgrade throughout? How has your approach changed?
Yeah, so for me, I generally right now I'm not buying tons of cards. Typically, that's not totally true. Like I am still buying cards. Like I probably am buying, let's say, 5 or 10 cards per week. But my cards are more driven and directed buys, like where I'm looking for a particular player on a particular team at the best price that I can get him. What I'm finding is that if I'm trying to, let's say I stack, which we haven't talked about tons, we'll talk about it maybe a bit more on our next show with stacking, is we both view that stacking and correlating is a really good way to construct lineups on the platform. And I know some people hate it on the platform, but myself personally, I like money. And if I think it's a way to help me make money, I'm going to do so. So it's a situation where I think stacking is very viable. And I think that you can sometimes make up some deficiencies that you have. And like even me, and this is the unique thing with Sorare. Like, for example, you might have a deficiency in division 3 and 4 right now. Would you agree that you probably have a deficiency compared to some of the top end people?
I have a deficiency everywhere compared to the top end people.
Correct.
You're on the right where I was going to go to.
Exactly. So like you have deficiencies. I still have deficiencies. My gallery is big and I have deficiencies. Like I can't compete against some of these players in the top divisions because I don't have the cards and the firepower that match up to them. So I have to do whatever I can to scrap and get as much of an edge as I can to gain back what I'm losing elsewhere. And what Alex just talked about with Cascante too, and this is what's crucial to everyone on the platform. For those of you guys listening, the most important statistic is none of what you see here. It's none of the scores he's putting up. It's none of his all-around, none of his decisive score. The most important score and the most important statistic on Sorare is he starts every game. That's the most important factor. If a guy starts and gets you 40, 50 points, you can overcome that. So as you see here, Beeson's been starting every game recently. Yeah, he has a couple not great games, but if you see him putting up 45 or 44 points, or even 40, like you can make up 35 to 45 points. What you cannot realistically make up in a lineup is a do not play. So with Cascante, you saw Alex just mentioned Cascante had a red card. I didn't know Cascante got a red card because I don't own a Cascante, but if I did, I would probably have known that. But so, for example, Alex now knows that this upcoming game week, he can't play Cascante. If he were to play Cascante, he's going to be a 0. That lineup's most likely dead. So it's a situation by like Alex just putting in the effort and knowing what's going on with situations is huge. And similar, like I've been, especially at the start of the season, there's so many people that are sitting out due to transfer rumors. The person I can think of is Rayon Cherokee. I own a Cherokee, and he was rumored to be going to the Bundesliga, so he did not play this week. So if I know someone may be transferring out and may not play, I've done it with my gank guys. Now, granted, that hasn't necessarily benefited me in regards to Paul Onuachu this week, but I know that there's a possibility he does not play on the weekend, so I don't really want to play him realistically, because if I don't play him, I still have a chance to get 5 guys that start. If you get 5 guys that start and you get 2 40s and then you get, let's say, 3 60 to 70s, you have a really good chance in every division to at least get a card, if not a okay card. So it's a situation where you really need to worry about a player playing. And then after a player starting every game, you're looking for a player that scores relatively well. So, Alex, I know that someone we've talked about within your gallery is Chase Gaspar for Minnesota. And this is a guy that's not the most flashy player. He is –
How dare you?
What?
How dare you?
I know, right? He looks like a guy that would definitely go out there and be flashy, but he's definitely not. So he's a guy that's going to just go out there. And as you can see, this game, he was injured, and Alex knew that he was injured, did not play him. And I assume you probably did not play him for this 60 because you were not sure if he'd be back. And that's something like, look, it's going to happen where if a guy's injured, you might miss a game of him coming back. But the idea is basically like if a guy's injured, just remove him from your thought process until you're sure he's going to play again, unless you don't have other options or you have like seen something or read something where he comes back. But anyways, as you can see with Chase Gaspar, he starts every single game for the most part for Minnesota, and he scores okay. So like, for example, if you play Chase Gaspar and he comes out and scores you 49 points, 52 points, that's fine. Yes, you might not hit a podium with that type of score, but when he hits an 83 or a 65, you could totally hit a podium with him. So it's a situation where you want guys that can do this type of stuff. Obviously, anyone wants a Neymar, anyone wants an Mbappe, but that's not realistic. To be more realistic, you want guys that like this. You want guys like Chase Gaspar that are going to play the game, that get you points. So I know you bought Gaspar, and that's pretty much what you were looking at. Like, I assume you bought Gaspar around like game week 180 or 181. So is that pretty much what you saw? Was you saw like this area code of what he was doing, and you're like, yeah, this seems like a good buy at this price point?
Yeah, I think I bought him even earlier than that.
Okay.
Maybe it wasn't too far removed from the few DMPs. Yeah, maybe somewhere in that middle before he hit his first like high score. So I mean, I got him, I think it was like 0.1 or 0.11 or something like that, and it's worked out great. And what you're talking about before with the deficiencies, so I also bought a Tyler Miller, so I can play Gaspar with Tyler Miller, Minnesota's goalie. I just have to get one thing right, and I have 2 correlated pieces that can compete with bigger cards if they both hit the right outcome, which is a correlated clean sheet outcome. So that's kind of what Sean was talking about. I think a good way to compete with better cards is pairing your goalie with a defender. And I think that there's less effective stacks, especially with the forwards, but I think goalie and defender is the strongest one you can make, especially if you're trying to overcome some stiffer competition.
Correct. And there's numerous types of stacks out there. There is like a goalie and one defender, a goalie and two defenders, a full team stack, a midfielder and a forward. Any type of stacking and correlation within the team can be considered that. But like as you can see with Miller and Gasper. So for example, Miller had a clean sheet on 192. If we look at Gasper, Gasper scored 60 points. How did he score 60 points? 10 of which came from the clean sheet, which helps correlate. So all of a sudden, Alex's lineup now has a 65 and a 60. He's 2/5 of the way to having a podium place or at least a probably tier 1 type of reward. And I know we've talked about it. Alex actually mentioned to me this weekend that he's like, I really need to buy a Debussy. And if you look at Debussy, we're going to click on him. You see that on game week 190, he scored 63 points. So all of a sudden, these three guys have attributed 185, 190 points of the three scores. Now, let's say you play a midfielder and a forward that also get you 60 points before that of any bonuses. So like, let's say an average bonus in Division 1 or in Division 4, for example, is 10%, because the captain's going to have 20, and let's say you have XP bonus to give you 10% average. So if you have 5 guys that average you 60 points and you look through, we'll look at the game week this week in America, that's going to put you around 350 once you give the bonus, right? So if we look at America D4 this week, you're going to see, and now granted, there were some massive scores out there this week in Sorare in the universe between global, champion Europe, champion America, challenge Europe, etc. There was just loads of big scores this week. You'll see if you were to receive 350 points this week, you'd be right around here at 94th place in America D4. If we go and we look at the prize pools for this week, you're going to see big results from those guys. So it's a situation where, Alex, do you see that as a situation where you can get a big card and get a good result?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it's tough, especially in the larger field, like Division 4, even some Division 3. But I mean, certainly, like I've had some shots at a high-end card with my current gallery, and we've seen our buddy Lardino hit a few podiums recently. He didn't have the top tier cards. He just had a group of guys that did well that week, and now he does have a couple of top tier guys. So, I mean, it is soccer. There is a lot of variance, especially with goals and assists, and that's going to be driving a lot of the scores. So, I mean, just get a couple of decisives and have a goalie defender pairing that clean sheet, and I think you're well on your way to start earning some rewards. And over time, you get a few rewards. You can keep them and improve your gallery, or you can sell them and then eventually have enough to make a big splash purchase on the site. So certainly the idea is just to kind of churn as many rewards as you can.
Exactly. And the thing is too, is like I just talked about, if you were in the 90s this week in terms of rewards, you're looking at, you get a tier 3, you're right on the edge of a tier 2. Hey, awesome, you got a reward, right? Or if you ran that in the global division last week and you put up 350 points, and let's say you're probably in this tier 2 to tier 3 range as well. So if you're putting up 350 points on average, which is basically having everyone to average around 60 or so points, you're going to get a card almost every week right now, which is all you realistically want. And then also to counter that, let's say you have a forward get you 70 and you have a midfielder get you 75. All of a sudden, you're up in the 380 to 390 range, and you're in a situation where you're getting a tier 1 card, which can really benefit your gallery. So as Alex just mentioned, our friend Lardino, in recent weeks, he has had some really strong finishes. He has a River Plate stack, which, as you see, last week got him a top 5 finish and got him a tier 2 card. That was on a short game week, which obviously, again, part of the reason we like stacking, and if you have a full team stack, and again, like, you don't need to run a full team stack. And if I had unlimited money and I could just run Neymar, Messi, Lewandowski, etc. in the same lineup, I would do that. Unfortunately, I don't, so I have to go within the restraints I have available to me. But if you go within the restraints that you have and you stack a team, every time that team plays, you have a lineup, which is a very underrated thing. So, for example, last midweek, Lardinho was able to run a lineup that if he did not have a River Plate stack, he couldn't have even ran, and that netted him a tier 2 card that he wouldn't have got otherwise. So looking back through Lardinho's stats recently, it's actually pretty funny because he uses a Minnesota stack like Alex is talking about. And I think you guys did it. I just don't believe you talked at all about it, and you just both ended up with a similar stack. Is that true?
Yeah, I hadn't talked to him. Does he have Gasper?
He does not, but he has Debasi.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it's just like a goalie defender stack that makes sense. It's reasonably priced. I think Miller's a pretty good goalie. Somehow St. Clair won the competition out of camp, but clearly he wasn't ready, and Miller quickly overcame him. Like, he's a 27, 28-year-old MLS goalie. Like, that could be a really good long-term card. And Gasper is not that old despite his male pattern baldness. So, I mean, it's a nice pairing for upcoming seasons as well.
Correct. And as you see, so here's Lardinho's team. This won Champion America D3. So as you see here, he received a tier 0 card and 0.3 ether. The tier 0 card ended up being Carlos Vela, which is probably around 0.6 or whatever. So effectively, Lardinho won 0.9 ether with this team right here. So if we look through these cards that he has, you're going to see the price points were not huge from what Lardinho paid on this. And so we look at Tyler Miller, and Lardinho probably paid around 0.36, which again, that's probably the going rate for a goalie.
You're growing business with goalies. So.
Yeah, you're gonna pay for a goalie, just how it is. But I'm trying to show everyone that you can do what you want to do, and you can win and really win well with a team that does not cost a lot. And I'll show you some of my teams that maybe cost a bit more that also can win, but these teams are doing the same thing that those teams are doing. He just paid a lot less than what I did for some of the cards. So if we look at Miller, I'm going to guess that Lardinho paid 0.35-ish. So let's call it 0.35. Then Debasi, he paid under 0.2 ether for Debasi Super Rare. So you're talking, let's call it 0.525 so far. He probably paid not tons for this Reynoso, which, as you see, looks like it's bugged out in his line, but he probably paid a 0.2. So the Debasi Super Rare, which we just showed, Debasi's been scoring fantastically, was less than the goalie, was less than the rare midfielder he had, and still relatively cheap. Albert Rusnak, he paid 0.185. So again, the two cheapest guys in this lineup that he had were the super rares, which is incredible to think about. And this goes to show you that buying super rares is not always as expensive as what everyone makes it out to be. Yes, obviously you're going to pay a little bit for them, but you see Rusnak, he bought Rusnak, and I can show you exactly where he bought Rusnak. And Rusnak was 0.185. Rusnak has effectively gone up 4x in value since he bought him. He bought Albert Rusnak right here. So as you can see,
that's insane.
As you can see, Albert Rusnak has gone insane for him since he bought him. But that goes to show, right? Rusnak is a guy that if you look at his all-time stats, he performs pretty well. Well, if you looked at the start of the season, he was playing every single game, which again, I told you is the most important thing on Sorare. So you see here, he played all but 1 minute in the first 6 weeks of the season. The thing is, he just didn't quite get any decisives. But it's a situation where you can look back in the future, in the past, and see that this is a guy that got decisives and got good scores. Like you see him putting up 69 with an all-around of 34. You see him putting up 70 with a decisive. You see him putting up 89 with a 20 all-around score and a decisive. So you could see via this player that the potential's there, and he's just sort of running, unfortunately, bad to start the season. So it's a player that was a great buy for him. And then to wrap out his team, he paid about 0.2 for Bo. So as you see, his whole team probably cost a little over an ether. And the two cheapest guys were Debasi and Rusnak. And then the three rares were more expensive than all of those guys. But he paid off that whole team with 1 week. This 1 week paid for that whole team. So it's one of those situations. And then if I look back 2 weeks prior, I believe, he won Global All-Star, or he got second, I believe, in Global All-Star Division 4, which is the most difficult division to win because everybody just plays all of their players there, and it's very difficult. So, yeah, as you see, he won Global All-Star Division 4. His team was about very cheap, which, as you can see, Reynoso for him has been a key player. But if we look at this team probably cost him even quite a bit less than what that team did. So he did pay quite a bit for Higagaki, but you can buy him pretty cheap. Yeah, as you can see, Alex, that's not a great price point for.
Well, I mean, it was in April though.
It was in the boom. Yes.
You needed to. You couldn't get a goalie for like under 0.45 or something.
Correct. And if you wanted to buy Higuchi today, you could buy him for under 0.2 ether, as you can see here. So like.
The good thing is he has another 6 years to play in the J League before he retires.
Exactly. So Lardino's set. Then we look at Mensa. Mensa was a reward. He probably got Mensa as like a tier 2 or tier 3 reward, which again goes to what we talked about. You just want to get rewards. If you get tier 2, tier 3 rewards, it doesn't matter. Just rack in rewards. So, for example, Mensa reward, he won him. Angelari paid 0.134. Casper Shabilko, I don't know exactly what Laird paid. As you can see, another reward. So as you see, this team was 2 rewards, a goalie that is worth like 0.2 ETH now, and then 2 other players that were worth 0.2 and 0.13 ETH. So this whole team cost Lardino under probably a half an ether. If you tried to do this team today. Granted, yes, he won a couple rewards, but there's no reason that any of you guys can't win those as we go. So he won Division 4, and he received a Carlos Gil, and he received also 0.65 ether. So that's like 1.3 ether from this team that cost him like 0.5 ether. And the week after this, the rewards were like Neymar, Lewandowski, Kimmich, to like the top 3 people. So if he won it just a different week, this team would have been worth like a 4 ether reward. So Alex, I know this is sort of you and Lardino are on similar paths. As you see with your gallery is worth right now 13.5, and Lardino's is worth like 18.5. So you're sort of getting to the point where your gallery is very similar. That is exactly what you're trying to accomplish, is it not?
Yeah, definitely piling the rewards. Like I just missed out on a podium like 2 game weeks ago, and I won a Daniel Saloy. Like, I mean, that's a great card. Probably 0.3 ETH or so. It was just from a reward. So yeah, just kind of churning like that. So you see, pulling it up.
Yeah.
So to kind of switch gears a little bit, so someone new coming on the platform, where do you think they should focus? Like I'm assuming like you're thinking like just Global 4 because you want to be able to turn the ETH reward. Is there any kind of benefit to focusing on one region initially, just so you have some utility between global and a specific region, and kind of how do you build out from there?
Definitely. So I think that for people coming on to the platform, it all depends on your budget point. And I think that definitely Global All-Star D4 is where you want to prioritize for the time being if you're coming in with a limited budget. And the reason being is you can win a card. Yes, it might be a little bit more different than the regional tournaments, but you can win a card still, and you get the 0.01 or 0.02 ETH from hitting the 205 point threshold and 250 point threshold. And for those of you guys that are new coming onto the platform, make sure you check our link in the description. And if you use that link in the description, you'll receive a free limited, which is the new yellow/gold cards for once you purchase 5 cards at auction. So you come in even below, which I think is very viable. I had someone reach out to me earlier today that was looking to just get started. Their budget is incredibly limited. And I recommended looking at the limited edition cards. If you look at the limited cards, I think you can buy a whole team for under like 0.1, 0.2 ETH. So yeah, you might still have to spend a couple $100s, but this is a team you can run over and over again.
Yeah, and also for people starting out, all the leagues are back. So I mean, if you scour the card, like you can get guys who play every game for like 0.02 ETH, except for goalies.
Correct.
So, I mean, like, buy a goalie and then you can kind of scour the market and kind of put together an initial team for probably under 0.3 ETH, but obviously it's still a bit more than someone coming in with 0.1 who might want to focus on the limited.
Correct. And so for you guys coming on the forum, some people use common goalies in Division 4. I understand. I get why people do it. I would recommend not doing it as soon as you cannot do it. And the reason I say that is we're just going to look. I have Alex's Division 4 from a couple weeks ago, right? And he received 230 points with this team. If he does not have Tim Malia, he is only going to score. If he has the Tim Malia common compared to the Tim Malia rare, he's going to get 290-ish points, 295, somewhere around 295. Well, if I look at the prize pools and I look, 295 points might not get you a card. 295 points might get you a situation where you don't receive a card. Or hypothetically, like let's say this team scored 260 points. Well, you having the common goalie costs you 0.01 ether. So let's say all of a sudden let's say over the course of a month that you having a common goalie costs you 0.03 ether and costs you 2 cards, which is very realistic. Well, 0.03 ether and 2 cards, even if they're not the best cards, you're probably looking at close to 0.1 ether. Well, we just saw with Higuchi, you can get a starting goalie for 0.2 ether. So like you having a rare goalie pays off that rare goalie in like 1 to 2 months, or like 2 to 3 months and 1 to 2 months if you sort of hit something that is a bit better. So I understand why people use a common goalie, and I'm not hating on using a common goalie. Totally, if it's outside of your budget, do not get a common or a rare goalie. But you will pay off the rare goalie relatively quickly, assuming that you have a team that can hit those thresholds and possibly get a card.
Sorry. I mean, it severely hampers your ability to progress and slows it down dramatically. And then once you do progress to a point, you're going to be the first thing you're going to buy is that goalie anyway. So it's just going to kind of make you go much slower.
Correct. So the idea is sort of just buy that rare goalie, and then as you progress, you're going to pay off that rare goalie. Or like Alex just said, like in the long run, let's say 3 months down the road, you grind it up and then you're going to get a rare goalie. If you just paid that rare goalie up front, you're going to pay off that rare goalie plus more that you wouldn't have if you just bought the rare goalie 3 months ago. So that's something I like to talk about because I know people play a lot of common goalies, and I totally understand it. And if you have to, you have to. And again, grinding out threshold and playing common goalies is better than not playing at all. It's just there is a better way to do it if you have the means to do so that I recommend. So we'll look at my lineup for this week a little bit, and I had a really good week. One of my best weeks on the platform, as you can see. Oh no, I got stat corrected in the weekly challenge. Oh, that's unfortunate. I lost a significant point total in the challenge, and it cost me. I was actually winning the weekly challenge. Good old stat corrections. They're never fun for anyone that eats a stat correction. But yeah, so I was actually in first place of this as of last night when I went to bed. But as you can see, I have a lot of lineups. I was able to enter a lot of different contests and was able to play that stuff. So like if I look at some of my teams, you're going to see players that are a lot more expensive than like what Alex was talking about with his team. So for example, if I look at my Challenger Europe Division 3 team, Ibrahim Sangare costs probably as much as Alex's entire Division 3 America team. And as you can see, that doesn't mean that he's going to score 80 to 90 points a game week. It just means that he costs more because obviously he's a younger player that has a bit more potential, that does more consistently score well. But on any given game week, that doesn't mean anything. And similarly, like if I look through some of my other lineups that we're looking at, you're just going to see guys, like if I look at my Champion Asia lineup, this lineup is much more expensive than what a lot of Champion Asia D3 lineups are. But as you can see, Everaldo is probably the most expensive player in this lineup, and Yuya Oki is the second most expensive player in this lineup, and they're the two lowest scoring players effectively. Inakui is very close, but so it's a situation where I think that you can do a lot with a lot less and be more than fine. So like you can fire up a Division 4 lineup for 0.6, 0.7 ETH as we just showed, and you can win just as much as like if I look at my lineup in Division 4 for Global this week, and I had a good showing, but this lineup is going to cost a lot more than what another lineup that could put up a similar price point could put up. So what's your thoughts on something like that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of a common theme in your lineups is stacking that you'll see. So I mean, it pretty clearly jumps out. Yeah, and just because the card's expensive doesn't mean they're going to perform every week. We'll get into, I think, on Wednesday about looking at how to make better lineups, and like matchups are a huge driver of what someone's expectation is for a specific game week. So the ability to have a deeper gallery, you can play the matchups more. Whereas if you're starting out and you just have 5 rares, like you're playing those 5 rares. So one question I did want to ask you is if you're starting out and you're coming in with a modest budget, maybe you're putting an ETH on, would you focus on building out one very solid lineup, or is volume better, build out a deeper gallery and be able to run 2 lineups, maybe one Challenger and one Global, or one Americas and one Global? Because I think a lot of people are going to side for the volume approach because they have more lineups. More lineups seems better, but is it?
I don't believe that necessarily more lineups is better on occasion. If someone is coming in and playing 1 ether, let's say you're coming in and putting 1 ether on the site and you want to focus, I think the first thing that's important is something Alex talked about. Focus on one region. The reason I recommend that is because when that region plays, generally everyone plays on the same weekend. So like if a league takes a week off, you would not be able to play if your stuff is broken apart. So for example, like Japan has been fractured from Korea. So like, let's say you had Japanese players and Korean players. You might not be able to field the lineup ever because they're sort of just fractured and their game weeks are different and they don't match up well. So I definitely recommend focusing on one league. And then also I recommend at the beginning to focus on more so players that score well, that are relatively cheap. And buying a bit more in bulk of those guys. And the reason I say that is because that will give you options and it also will help you progress eventually. So someone that I know that is really cheap, and I actually recommended this person last week to someone, and he ended up having 100 points without a decisive. That's how good of a game he is and how good he can score, is Francisco Calvo with the Chicago Fire. So he plays every single game for the Fire. If you look at his scores, you're going to see that he had a bunch of DNPs. But again, this goes into research. He was at the Gold Cup with the Costa Rican team. So as you see, this is a guy that's worth 0.05 ether. So like if I'm building a team, I could get 4 of these guys at defense for 0.2 ether. And then I have options in utility. I have options at defense every week. Then I can buy a couple midfielders, a couple forwards, and a goalie. And all of a sudden I'm ready to roll. But as you can see, this is a guy that has really good score lines. He has an L40 of 56, a 60 in the L15. And if I look at his scores, like you see, he has some big game weeks. And a lot of these don't include decisives. Like you see these, he's having like weeks where he has a 45 all-around score, and this week he had over 100 points and didn't have a decisive. So this is a guy that can score fantastically for you without having a decisive. So I recommend buying guys like this that can really help you sort of progress as you go. Eventually, you're going to want to buy more marquee players and more top-end guys, but I also recommend buying defenders. So if you're looking for guys that score consistently well, guys that play every game, generally, if you look at center backs, you're going to be able to find these type of players. So I recommend to people looking at center backs, like some player that had like this type of score line that's a midfielder or a forward due to scarcity is going to be like 0.25 ether. So I like having an abundance of defenders to choose from compared to the other positions. And yeah, going back to what you talked about with my best lineups this week, we'll go through all of my lineups this week and see how they did. So, and take also all of these lineups, yes, they might be in different divisions, but that doesn't mean you can't play the same players in Division 4 or Division 3. You can play them in whatever division you want. You just got to buy the rare card or the super rare or the unique of the card. So we'll look through my best lineups here and see like what type of correlation I had or if I had none. So as you see, All-Star D1, I had a 3-man Gambo Osaka stack. My other 2 uniques, actually I had a 4-man Gambo Osaka stack with Usami, but like as you see, the forwards don't necessarily correlate to the defense. So they had a clean sheet. All 3 scored well due to the clean sheet in part, and that has got me a reward in All-Star D1. If you ran this in D4 or D3 or D2 in whatever variation, all of them scored very well. All-Star Division 2. As you see, I have a Chicago Fire stack here on the defense. The other 3 players are sort of just like the 3 best options I had to plug into those, and they all scored relatively well as well. But again, a stack. If we look down in Division 4, again, we have a Kawasaki Frontale stack. And you could run this in Division 4, 3, 2, 1, and it would score well. As you see, they average around 70 points. And then I also had a Porto offensive stack, which helped because they were both able to get a decisive within that same game. And the offensive stacking doesn't matter as much in terms of like they might not combine on a given goal, but the reason I like offensive stacks too that work is like, let's say a team is a 3.5 goal favorite. I think they're going to score 3 to 4 goals in that game, which means that they have chances to get decisives. Realistically, all you want is 1 decisive. If you get a decisive from a player, you're happy. If every single player in your team gets a decisive, you're getting a card. So like that's generally how I approach things and how I want things. And let's continue looking. So this team did pretty well. No stacking whatsoever. This was just guys I had that decently scored. That's how it worked. But as you see, like again, I'm not near the podium with this team. And then I go down, and you'll see stacking obviously too with teams like that didn't work. This is a Columbus Crew stack. They got shut out. So this team did not do very well, despite Jack Price having a very good game not being on the crew. And then, again, Division 4 of Champion America, I had a San Jose Earthquake stack, and they both scored very well on defense. And then Champion Asia D3, again, stack of the Antlers. And then last but not least, I have U23 D3, which I was able to win, was with Bijlo and Malaysia stack. Granted, U23 stacks are a bit harder to come by usually than other options, but that is how it goes. And then obviously the weekly challenge, I had no stack really. These guys are on the same team, but the correlation from them wasn't really worried. It was more so I just had to play players that played. So as you can see, correlation stacking can definitely has its advantages, or as we see with some of these lineups, it can totally tank your lineup if they don't do well. If a team concedes like what we saw with the Columbus Crew, like this lineup is not going to have much of a chance with these guys conceding and not doing that well. So stacking can work, but it can also totally obliterate your lineup as well.
Yeah, but which is fine because you don't need every lineup to produce a card each week. So that's one of the great things with Sorare is you're not paying entry fees. You have your card. So you can just fire it up next week. And if over the course of the season, your crew stack hits 3 or 4 times and with podiums, great. It's kind of a high variance way to play that will pay you off in the long run if your stacks make sense. So yeah, it's definitely a great thing. And getting back to something you said earlier, when you're building out volume of steady producers, it is nice to have that one anchor player that you can count on for a consistent high-end score. Like somebody like a Jack Price is a great anchor player for an MLS lineup. So for me, initially coming onto the site, I was building up my gallery with all those value players, C value, and then at some point you get to the point where like you can only play so many lineups, so there's not as much incremental value as pulling in additional value players. So you need to start buying and acquiring some of those anchor type players that you can rely on for some high end finishes. So I remember getting Jack Price was one of my first higher end acquisitions, and definitely helped solidify some of my MLS lineups. So yeah, that's definitely something you want to look at once you build up your gallery over time. Is start.
Definitely, and I agree with that actually 100%. And I think that term anchor player is a great option. And my definition of anchor player is a player that you can play no matter what against whoever, and he will likely score well. And Jack Price is the perfect example. And as you see, my priorities change week in, week out. It depends on what the rewards are for that given week. But as you see here, one of my priority lineups this week was my America Division 2 lineup. I had 4 Columbus Crew guys stacked, so I had to play one other person. I used Jack Price because I'm pretty confident that he will score 50 to 60 points regardless if he gets a decisive. And if he gets a decisive, I'm looking in the 70 to 80 range. So anchor players in any division are crucial. And Jack Price is one of them. Who are some of your favorite anchor players, Alex?
I mean, for MLS, like someone like Nani, like if you have a forward Nani, like you can play him against anybody in the MLS. And obviously, a forward Nani is different than a midfield Nani. We'll probably get into some of those nuances in later episodes. But yeah, just someone like Nani, Carlos Gil, when he's healthy, obviously an anchor player. So, I mean, you're to the point where in a lot of your lineups, you're making lineups with mostly anchor players, which is, I guess, a nice thing. But you're still not at that point with like Division 1 and 2. Like you're still playing like those value type players, relative values in those leagues. So it's definitely interesting that like you don't need the best players in the world to be competitive, as you've shown. You can get great cards at a fraction of the price point of those absolute top tier names and have similar results. So a lot of it comes down to, are you playing this Sorare as kind of a collectible, or are you playing the fantasy game? And I think a lot of people are actually playing the fantasy aspect. I think that's reflective in the marketplace to an extent, but still you see like the guys like Neymar are demanding that extreme premium where they're not worth it to buy to play. Yes, if you love Neymar and you want a longer term collectible and you believe in the platform long term, you want to hold a Neymar for 3 years and then flip it, that's one thing. But if you're looking for value in the game, like the Neymars aren't where you're looking.
Yeah, definitely. And I would agree. As of right now, I would say that most of my rare players that I can play are like anchor type players. Like we talk about Morioka each week because he has like 60 points by the 20th minute every single game. And he's a great definition of an anchor player. But so right now, all of my rares are anchor type players in terms of midfielders and defenders. Forwards can never really be anchors. Because of the problem that they rotate some generally, and if they don't score a goal, they generally aren't that good. With the exception of like if I had Neymar or if I have those type of guys. But most of my guys are anchor type players that I play in the midfield or defense. And I have some anchor players that are in super rares. But if you look through my super rares, like I definitely am playing some super rares that are not the best super rares. Like Chris Durkin is not the best super rare. He doesn't score fantastically well, but if he plays a good matchup or has a decent matchup, like I might be able to play him. Similar, like Edo Kayambi is not a great super rare, but I have to play guys like that because I don't have unlimited super rares to play, even though people might think that someone like me would have that. I don't, because of all the regions I'm playing. So, and that's one of the cool aspects of Sorare is that I feel there is a constant ability to progress and improve your teams no matter where you're at. Like I am at a good point. Like I have one of the bigger galleries on the platform at this point, and I can always progress and improve my team. Like all of a sudden, like if I turn out this Edo Kayambi and turn it into like a Ryoto Morioka super rare, that's going to be fantastic for me. But I don't have the financial means to do all of those things. So it's just a progression over time. Like this game week, I'll probably have some decent rewards, hopefully, and I'll hopefully get some guys in. Maybe I'll get a reward this week that is a better player than KMB. So then next week, I'm not necessarily playing KMB. I have someone else as an option. So I think that's cool because, like, I know you talked about it earlier with your winning of Daniel Shalhoub. He was worth about 0.3 ether, and all of a sudden, he's probably one of your better rare forwards that you have in your gallery. So you went from playing so-and-so, and you've upgraded effectively to playing Shalhoub. So there's always progressions no matter what level you're at, I feel, in this game, which I think is a really cool aspect. Do you agree?
Yeah, definitely. That's always a nice reward. I am looking to sell my Boo. If anybody's interested in buying Gustavo Boo for 0.3, let me know. I thought he would be on sets with Heal Out, and he hasn't been. He's still been producing decisive, which is great, but the price tag's a bit rich. So I think he could regress a bit the next few weeks, not being on sets and not having the playmaking ability of Heal. So, I mean, there's kind of those things. But if I could sell Boo for what I paid for and then kind of just swap in Saloy, that's great for me. So question for you, if you wanted Mbappe or Neymar, would you hold them or would you sell them to reinvest into your club? Because I think it's an interesting question, and it has some impacts to other people, maybe at different levels. Maybe it's not Neymar, but it's something you could sell and drastically improve your club or take a profit from. So what do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I'm in a bit of a different situation, and I've told other people this. So if I were to win one of them, I would hold them based on the fact that they are good utility-wise and they are great from a collectability standpoint. But what I would say to someone is, let's say you have a 5 ether gallery and you got Mbappe and you could sell him for, let's call it 10 ether. I think it's below that now. I think it's like 8, but let's just call it 10. Well, you can go and do a lot with that ether that you can't do if you have Mbappe on your gallery. And Mbappe, especially, like, he's good, but he's not the best. Like, I can play Noah Lang, and I talked about this the other day, I believe. I can buy Noah Lang and score better than Mbappe for 10% the price. So, like, for example, if I wanted Mbappe and I was on like your gallery type, I might sell him because I know if I sell Mbappe, all of a sudden I am now playing in what are you playing in right now? You're playing in division. What divisions are you currently playing in if like everything's flowing?
Global 2, 3, and 4, America's 2, 3, and 4, and I think I can play Euro Challenger 2, 3, and 4. It gets a little bit thin. Like my global 2 is kind of just some random pieces, my random so rares, hoping to put something together. So I need to solidify those. So playing 3 and 4 and then America's 2 would be my focus.
Yeah, so like all of a sudden, like you sell, and when you say you're playing those divisions, you'll agree that you're playing them, but maybe not being as competitive as you could be if you had a little bit more.
Sure. For sure.
So all of a sudden, like let's say you got 10 ether that you just got and could plunk it down. Well, all of a sudden, you're now able to play, let's say, Asia D2, 3, and 4, and you're able to improve 1.5 ether into America D2, Europe D2, Global D2. All of a sudden, you just increased your utility by 3 divisions. You increase your utility by improving another like 6 divisions by getting good super rares that also have trickle down effect into division 3. So I think if you're on a smaller gallery, I would look at selling a card like that to make continuous improvements. Whereas if I was on my gallery, like I have a situation where like I have a lot of cards that are pretty good and I can fire these guys out any given game week and be okay. And again, like as you see, I'm having a great week here. I'm going to win quite a few rewards. So it's a situation where you can really improve what your utility can be if you get something like that. Whereas like someone like me getting 10 ether from Mbappe is not really going to drastically improve my teams per se. Whereas like having the Mbappe might actually help me as well. So I would not sell him. I think other people probably should sell that card. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting take to look at.
Yeah, definitely. That makes a lot of sense. One last point I wanted to make with kind of building out your gallery is not rushing buys on the secondary market and sending people offers instead. Things are a bit different when you're trying to shop for super rares. There's not as many opportunities. Sometimes if you want a card, you kind of have to pay for it. But I think with a lot of people, they kind of just buy the lowest ask, especially people starting out on the secondary market. And you can save a lot long term just by sending competitive offers to people. That's where you want to use Sorare data, go in and see what the recent sale points have been. Maybe there's a large gap between the low list and what it's actually been selling for. So just by taking the low ask, you're dramatically overpaying when you don't need to. You can send the person a message on Discord if they have their name posted and kind of just work through the negotiation process so it's a fair offer for both sides. So that's one thing. If you're just coming on the platform, you could probably quickly start overpaying for cards if you're not aware of kind of the best approach for that.
Correct. And I'll use this as an example right here. And this isn't to say sometimes the low offer is as good as you can get. I usually find if there's like 8 to 10 of a card on the market, someone will go below what the low ask price is almost every time. But so we're just going to use Marcelino Moreno here. You see that he has an absolute smasher, does really well for Atlanta, scores really well, good age and whatnot. So his low ask on the market is 1.5. So I'm going to look here and see if there's any others that are out there, any other super rares that are posted in the market. And I see that there is not. And I'm going to go to Sorare data, as Alex just talked about, and I'm going to type in Moreno's name. And I'm going to look to see what type of value his price points have been. So as you can see, his rare is about 0.2. His super rare is 1.5. That's probably too big of a gap right now. And the recent sales on his super rare was at 0.65 just a week and a half ago. If I look at auction prices, I see it's around 0.7. So by doing this, I'm pretty much telling myself that 1.5 is absurd and I wouldn't pay a 1.5 price on him. And his price is probably around 0.6 to 0.75 ether. So if I go and I offer limitless 0.6 ether on Marcelino Moreno, will he take it? Maybe not, but at least for myself personally, I know a range of like what I think is a fair number for Moreno, and I will go and offer that. So for example, a good example would be like, let's say he had Marcelino Moreno priced at 0.9. I think 1.5 is a bit high on Moreno. 0.9 would be more realistic, or 1. So if he had it listed at like 0.9, I might start and offer him like 0.6. And then I might work my way up to like 0.7, 0.75. And if he rejects all of those offers up to that point, I'm just going to be like, hey, I'm not going to pay. I don't want to overpay on this card. I'm going to look elsewhere. Maybe I'll find another midfielder that is just as good, if not better than Moreno, and I can get a better price point. So yeah, Alex is 100% right. You definitely don't want to just always buy the low price on the market. Just go look. Maybe someone's really wants ether because they want to buy a new player. So like they really need to sell the card. So maybe they're going to give you a deal compared to what other people list. That said, again, sometimes you have no choice. Sometimes you will have to pay the low price if you want a card. But you should always be looking at Sorare data to see if it makes sense or if you should maybe look for a different player or something. So I think that will wrap it up for us today. Our next show will be a little bit later in the week, either Wednesday or Thursday, and we will be discussing a bit more in depth in terms of like strategy and stacking and stuff like that, and like what we're looking at and how we would approach going through. We might even we'll mock like we're going to build a stack in a certain division and like what we're thinking and how we think we should approach it. So stay tuned for that. Alex, is there anything else that you would like to add before we wrap up here today?
No, been fun. Sounds good. We'll see you all later in the week.
Perfect. So yeah, that'll wrap it up for us here today. Make sure everyone, if you are new to Sorare, that you check out the link in the description, and that will help you sign up for the site, and then you will receive a free limited edition card for after you buy 5 cards on the auction house. The auction house is the primary market where you can go and bid on players. So once you bid and win 5 players, you'll receive a free limited card. So make sure you check that out. So we will see you guys later in the week. Good luck the rest of this game week and the following one. We'll see you later. Good luck, everybody. For Alex, I am Sean. See you later.